so as we discussed about Apache Maven, it's a build tool which is going to help us manage our code. It is going to clean up the temporary files or old .class files. It is going to compile using the javac command, and it is going to create the packaged jar files. Okay, so jar files are created to distribute our code or share our code, Java code, with other users, okay, or into the public world. So Maven is going to help us manage our code. Secondly, the biggest advantage that we get with Apache Maven is we don't need to manage the dependencies, or we don't need to download, okay, and copy the jar files of, or we can say we don't need to download and copy the public jar files, public or open source jar files. So what happens when we are talking about any framework, or when we talk about any library, like suppose one library is there which is going to help us with all the calculator related operations, to calculate the power, to calculate the sine value, cos value, or trigonometric value. So all these calculations somebody has written in a class file or in a Java file, compiled. There may be multiple Java files, then compiled those Java files into a specific file which is called as a jar file. After compiling, we'll get the .class files. Then we used to package, okay, and packaging, after packaging we get the calculator.jar file. So that person is going to open, or that person is going to give that jar file to the internet, to the whole, like, people who are trying to access that jar file. So they need to download that jar file manually, they need to copy it, okay, then only they can use it. But with Maven, we don't have to do all these things. We just have to tell which jar file we need. Maven will automatically download that jar file from internet and provide that jar file into our project. So we don't need to manage the dependencies manually. So that can be done automatically by Maven. Okay, so these are the two advantages that we get with Apache Maven. So let's do one thing. Let's create a project to understand how it works. Fine. So let's create a project, a simple project which is not a Maven project. We'll see how a simple project behaves. Then we'll see like how Maven is going to help us. Okay. So first of all, let's create a new simple project. I click new on the Java project. So let's keep the name as scientific calculator. Okay, so let's call it as simple scientific calculator application. So this application is responsible, okay, is responsible of like calculating some of the math related operations for us, and we are going to provide this application's code base as part of a jar file. So now we are creating a new Java project, simple scientific calculator app. Click on finish. So here I'll close the old projects, anything, yeah. So this project, within that I'm creating a new Java class file, and let's call the name as, let's give a package com.example.calc, and let's give it the name as the scientific calculation. Okay, scientific calculation. Fine. Now in this class I'm going to have some of the scientific calculation methods, like let's find out the square root. So public, and let's return double square root, and here I'm going to pass another double value. Okay, so let's call it input. So we'll give an input, and that input value square root it is going to return. So it's going to return math.sqrt, and we're going to pass the input. Okay, so actually this sqrt function, it contains all the logic, but anyways, just for understanding, we are creating this method square root. Fine. Now this class, it contains a method, public method, name is square root. It takes a double data and returns that data, the double values, square root value. So if we pass 4.0, we're going to get back 2.0, right? Similarly, so what happens, I need to create a new project, okay? And I need to create a new project which needs some of the square root operations, okay? So this is the first project which is having all this logic. I want to create a new Java project. Right click, new, let's call Java project. Here, calculator application. So let's call it a simple calculator application. So this calculator application asks the user for input and gives the corresponding values, okay, by generating, by like performing the scientific operation, it will give the value. Now in this project, the first project is simple scientific calculator app, which is containing a scientific or a method which we call as square root. Now the second project is something which the user is going to use. Here I am having a class. Let's give a package name com.example.calculator.user calculator. Let's calculator app. So in this calculator app, I will be having a main method. The user is going to run this main method and the user is going to provide some data over here. Double input equals to 4.0 double value. Okay, the user has given some double value. Now the user wants the square root of this input. So the user is going to write the logic over here. Logic to calculate square root. But why should he write it again? He has already written the code, the logic somewhere else. So we need to reuse this logic. Okay, now we have two projects. The logic to calculate square root is already written in this first project, that is simple scientific calculator app. In simple calculator application, the user wants to find the square root. So the user doesn't want to write that logic. The user wants to import the logic from the old project. So what the user can do in the old project, the user can export the .class files in a Java format that is called as the jar file, which stands for Java archive. So what we need to do, we need to right click on the old project that is containing the square root logic. Let's call export and select the jar option under Java. We can select the jar file option, click on next, and here we need to select the project which we want to convert to jar file. So in the simple scientific calculator app, I am going to remove all the extra information. .class path, .project is not needed. Source file is also not needed. So second. Okay, so let's select the src folder. Fine, nothing else we need to select. Now let's export this jar file on the desktop. So let's call this as calculator utility. Fine, click on next and click on finish. Okay, now we can go to the desktop and find out that that file has to be present somewhere here. This is the calculator utility. So this file is created right now. So let's verify. Today 10:51 p.m. So this file is created right now. So this is the jar file. If you open this jar file using 7G for WinRAR or some jar utility, zip utility, you can find out that it contains the Java file, okay, the .class file of this scientific calculation class. So what we have done now, we have created a simple project that is containing the utility, that is to calculate the square root. We have exported this project's .class files into a jar file that is called as the Java archive. So what we can do now, we can share that jar file with the second project. So simple calculator application, it needs to reuse that square root function. What we will do, we'll create a new folder, right click, new, and folder. Let's give it the name leave. And what we are going to do, we are going to copy the jar file which we just created. So this is the first project's jar file which is containing the square root utility. Let's copy that and paste it over here. So after pasting into leave folder, what we need to do, we need to right click on the jar file, go to build path and click on add to build path option. Remember, you must be using package explorer to get this option. To right click on the jar file and build path, add to build path will be available only in package explorer. If you don't use package explorer, you can do it the other way. So let me remove it back. So now what I've done, I have copied and pasted that into this leave folder. I will right click on the project, go to build path, and I will go to the last option, that is configure build path. In this, I can go to this option, that is libraries. I will click on add jars. Here I can expand the current project. I can go to leave folder and select the file that I need to add. Click on OK. Fine. Let's click on OK. So both the options are fine. Now we have access to the calculator utility jar files dot class files present in that jar file. Okay. So this is part of the first project. We don't need it anymore. Let's close that because we have got access to its jar file. So now inside calculator app, I don't need to write the logic to calculate the square root. Rather than that, I can reuse the function written in utility jar file. So how to use that? So let's call it as double, okay, square root value equals to, that is present in which class? Scientific calculation. So scientific calculation. So control and space. So it will import. You can see the scientific calculation is imported from this package. But this class is not present in this project. That is present in the separate project. Okay, so now we have imported that class. And I need to call this method. So that method is not static. I need to create an object of this class first. So let's create an object. Calculator util equals to new scientific calculation. Here calculator util dot square root. Okay, and I need to pass the input data. Are you getting me? So I have created an object. This class is present in the jar file. I have created that object of this class, and using that object's reference, I am calling the square root method, and it is going to give me the square root value. Here I can print square root value of 10 using jar file utility, and the value is going to be plus. Fine. So this is how general projects they used to work if you don't have Maven. In those cases we used to work like this. But there are certain problems. If somebody changes the utility's square root method, or some new method is available in this utility class, then we need to download the jar file again. We need to copy that jar file into our library folder. Then we need to add it back to the build path. Then only we can access the new feature. Okay. So to do that, let's do it again. So let's, in this old class scientific calculation, you can see only one method is present. Okay, so let's add one more method, public void, and let's call it power. Okay, while calculating the power, we are going to pass two values, int x and int y, and it should return the integer value. So what we are going to do, we are going to write a for loop to calculate the power. Int I equals to 0, I less than, so this is the number and this is the times we are going to power. So if we pass number equals to 2, this is going to be 2 and this is 3, that becomes 2 to the power 3. Okay, that will become 2 to the power 3, which is equals to 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2. Okay, so how many times we are multiplying? 1, 2 and 3, that depends on number of times. So we are going to loop it that many times. Int I equals to 0, I less than times I plus plus, and here I am going to put the power value. So what I am going to do, I am going to calculate the power value. Okay, power value equals to number multiplied by the number itself. Okay, so when I do this, what is happening? If the loop executes one time, then I am getting the power like 2 to the power 2. So that is wrong. So I should make it minus 1, or I can start it from 1. I equals to 1, I less the number of times. If it is equals to 1, yes, by default the power value will be number. So if 2 and 1 is received, we need to return 2 only. At the last, we need to return power value. If this is false, if this is 1, it will not be executed. If it is 2, then I return to the power 2. Number into number. If it is 3, 1 and 2. For 1, I'll have number 2 multiplied by 2, that is 4. So I'm going to multiply our value to number. Okay, fine. So say this is some logic which I have implemented. Otherwise, we can directly call math.pow method. That is also going to return us the value, the power of number of this much times. Okay. So 2 to the power 3, that will be 8. 3 to the power 3, that will be 27. So like that. So suppose I have added a new method to this utility, but I have not created the jar file, I have not copied it. So in this calculator app, even if I try to call calculator util.pow, I won't be able to access that. Okay, int power value equals to, see, I will find this error because pow is undefined. Okay, the method pow is undefined because no such method exists. In the jar file, we cannot find this method. So what we need to do, we need to create the first project's jar file, right click, export, jar file, next, select the default options that we have. Okay, finish and replace the old jar file. Fine. Now that jar file needs to be copied to the second project. So let's copy paste it here in the lib. Yes, to all. Done. And now we can call the pow method. Let's refresh this project. Right click, refresh, and let's see if we can. Okay, the method name is power. We can call the power method now. Okay, so these all steps are needed if we make any changes in the utility. So this thing used to happen a lot of times. So to remove this problem of copying or of creating the jar file, sharing it with others, and like copying the jar file into project and doing all this stuff, we can switch to Maven, in which these things can be done easily without like putting a lot of effort. So while talking about Maven, we come across three information. Okay, three things we need to remove. We need to understand. The first part of Maven is called as the group. So to define a Maven repository or to define a jar file, we need to have three information. One is group, second is artifact, and third is version. To give you some examples, let's talk about the group. So we can say that the group is basically the company or business name, and this needs to be in the package structure, or we can say that reverse of domain name. And artifact is name of software. Okay, this is the name of software, or we can say name of utility. Okay, and third one is the version, which says version of the software. Okay, the version can be any meaningful name like 1.0. Okay, some say it as 1.0.0 or 1.0.1.2, or some give it as a beta version. Okay, so it depends on the user, okay, on the organization, how they want to create. To give you some example, suppose Google created a utility to manage file system in Android mobile phones. So this is the problem statement. So we want to create a Maven we want to create the Maven structure of a project, which is actually a utility which is created by Google. What Google has done, Google has created this utility to manage the file system in an Android mobile phone. So first of all, the group name is Google, and in Maven we need to specify the group name, okay, in an XML file. So we need to write it like this: group and slash group. So it's going to be group name, I think. Second. This is called as a group ID. Okay, Maven calls it as group ID. So we need to define group, artifact, and version this way. So let's get back to our example. So Google has created this utility. Okay, so Google has created the utility to manage file system in Android mobile phones. So the group ID is basically the company or business name, that is Google, and it follows the package structure, which is reverse of the domain name. So google.com is the domain, so it is going to be com.google. So this becomes the group ID for Maven project. Artifact is a file manager. Okay, manage the file system, that we can call a file manager. So artifact can have any name, file-manager, okay, or in capital letters and small letter, file manager, whatever you want to specify, you can specify. So this is called the software name. So one can understand that this is a file manager which manages the file and all. Then the version is the version of this software. So if it is the first version, we can give the version name as 1, or we can give a 1.0 version. So like this, Google will create the project. So the current example that we have created, we had to give 3 information. Okay, one is the group ID, one is the artifact. So our current project is calculator application. Suppose that is developed by example.com domain. Okay, so we are going to give it as com.example, and the artifact, that is the name of the software, let's call it calculator-utility. and the version is 1.0 and we're still testing it, so let's call it beta. So we can give any name that we want. So what we are going to do now, we are going to create the calculator application, and we are going to provide these three group ID, artifact ID and person information. Okay, so let's go ahead to Eclipse. Let's close everything and right click. So close all projects. So we're going to create these utilities. So let's create the project, right click, new and Maven project. Here we need to select the first option, create a simple project, skip archetype selection. Next, now here we need to give the group, artifact and version. So the group name, as we have seen here, the group name is going to be com.example. So let's give the same group name. Artifact ID, it's going to be calculator utility. Copy, give the artifact name, and the version is going to be 1.0 beta, or you can skip the version because there is a default version which already Eclipse has created for us. Anyways, we're going to use 1.0 beta. Fine, so let's click on finish. Now Maven will create that Java project for us. You can see the Java project is now ready and it's created for us, in which we have 4 source folders. The first 2 source folders, they used to basically contain the code and helper files or the configuration files, which are the part of the main business logic. The second, the third and fourth source folders, they're basically the code. They used to contain the code base and the resource files or the config files needed to test the business logic. Now we don't need to write any test cases, we don't need any resources, so we're going to delete these 3 information. So right click, delete, click on OK. Now we have only one source folder, that is src/main/java. So in this source folder, we are going to write the code that we have created earlier, scientific calculation.java. So let's copy and paste it over here. Let's expand and let's give the package name properly, that is com.example package com.example.calculator. Put your mouse on this and click on move. So now in this calculator utility, we have a class called scientific calculation, and here we have 2 methods, square root and power. Fine. So let's close the old projects because we don't need them anymore. So let's close that. Now in this project, we can see some more information. One is the src folder, which is actually containing the information, the main source code for us. But in Eclipse, we can see this same file, the same folder over here. And there is one more folder called as target. This folder is basically responsible, this is created by Maven. Whenever we build our project, as we discussed earlier, Maven is a build tool. It used to clean the files, temporary files, .class files. It used to create the jar file, etc., compile the class files. So while doing that, Maven used to put these files into this target folder. Okay, and Maven used to work on this pom.xml. So all the configuration, all the details about the project, all the dependency information, all the jar files or all the libraries that our project depends on are basically put inside this pom.xml. So after opening this pom.xml, we need to go to this bottom last option. Here we can see the XML code, okay, or XML syntax. Here it specifies the group, artifact and version, which we have given while creating the project. You can see com.example calculator utility 1.0 beta. So these 3 information uniquely identify a single Java project in a computer system. Okay. So now in our computer, these 3 information are required to basically get access to our project. So this is the utility project. These are the 3 information. So we're going to reuse these 3 information in the second project. Now this project, first project, it's a utility project. It is containing some information that's done. So let's go and create the new project, which is going to reuse the first project's utilities. Right click, new, Maven project. Next. So the second project, let's give a proper naming convention, com.example, that is the group ID, artifact, calculator, -app. Let's give the name as calculator app application. Okay, and the version is 0.1 final. Any name that we can give. Fine. Now click on finish. Now the second application is ready, calc application. We don't need these three source folders, source main resources, source test Java, source test resources. Let's delete them. And we need to reuse the logic which is written in this calculator utility project. So this calculator application, it actually depends on calculator utility, because if calculator utility does not exist, this project cannot be compiled. Okay, this project doesn't have any existence. So earlier what we used to do, we used to export this project into a jar file, then we copy that jar file, then we add that to build path. Now we're not going to do that. Rather than that, we're going to define inside this calculator application project that calculator utility is a dependency, okay, or calculator application needs calculator utility. For that, we need to open the pom.xml file of calculator application, go to the pom.xml section. Here we can see the group artifact and version information of the current project, that is com example calculator application, and this project, it depends on the utility project. So we are going to give the tag dependencies. Remember, this is the plural form, and within that we are going to add a dependency. Okay, and within these two dependency section, we are going to define which project it depends on. The last project is calculator utility, so let's go to calculator utilities pom.xml, go to the last option and copy these three ID information. Now we have copied this project's ID information, group ID, artifact and version. Let's go back to the first project, calculator applications pom.xml, and put those information as a dependency. Now to format this file, use Ctrl+Shift+F or Command+Shift+F on MacBook. Fine, so the dependency information is given. You can see the file is not yet saved. And when you look at this project, it doesn't contain any other reference projects or any other libraries, any other references. So when we save this file, this project will automatically contain some Maven dependency. That means this project is created using Maven, and this project depends on calculator utility project. So now we have got access to the second project. Okay, now we can start writing the code inside the main method of the application. Let's create a class com.example.calculator calculator app, and let's keep the name as application. Click on finish. Here we can create a main method and we can start using the class files. So which is the class file? Scientific calculation.java. So we need to create the object of that class, scientific calculation. Now we have access, ELC util equals new calculation. Fine. Here we can start calling the methods, calculation util dot power, I can pass 2 and 4, and I can print the value. Similarly, I can call calculator util dot square root, and I can pass 4, which is going to return 2 for me. So let's run this code. Right click, run as Java application. So 2 to the power 4, that is 16, and the square root of 4 is 2.0 in double format. So this is how it happens in Maven. We have not downloaded the jar file. We have now we're going to modify certain things. Then also we don't need to copy and paste the jar file again. So here, suppose I have made some changes. So while returning some value, the function prints that calculating square root of input. So now these changes are done, and if you want these changes to be available in the application, then we need to just right click on the calculator utility, go to run as Maven Install. When we do Maven Install, this jar file is created, which we can see in the console that it is actually creating the jar file and putting that jar file into a common location. See here, now it is creating the jar file which is created, and it is, you can see the jar file calculator utility 10beta.jar. It is putting that jar file into a common location. Now after putting that jar file into that common location, when we refresh calculator application, right click and refresh, it will automatically reuse that jar file. Okay, it will automatically take the jar file from that location. So let's run the code that we have written right now. Earlier this code was just printing these two values. Now while calculating the square root, it should print one more message. So right click, run as Java application. Okay, so the new changes are automatically reflected. Earlier it was printing 2.0, now it is printing calculating square root of 4.0, and this is 2.0. So these changes are done automatically. We don't have to copy, we don't have to create jar or copy or do anything, and they're available directly. So this is how Maven helps us. It minimizes a lot of effort of the developer and helps manage our code in a better way.